long before satellites mapped the ocean floor, before divers scanned for ruins beneath the waves, and long before novels, movies, and maps turned Atlantis into legend. There was only a voice, the voice of Plato. It was around 360 BCE, in a quiet corner of ancient Athens, where Plato composed two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, philosophical texts meant to explore the nature of the universe, the soul, and society. But within those scrolls, he told a story, not a parable, not quite a myth, but something more subtle, a memory passed down, he claimed, from Egyptian priests to the Athenian lawgiver Solon, and from Solon to Plato's own ancestor, a story about a powerful island nation beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. That island, he wrote, was Atlantis. In Plato's telling, Atlantis had existed some 9,000 years earlier, a rich and mighty empire, larger than Libya and Asia combined, ruling over lands, peoples, and seas with unmatched splendor. It had great kings, golden temples, sacred laws, and one day it vanished, swallowed by the ocean in a single, dreadful day and night. But Plato did not present this as fantasy. He embedded the tale inside a philosophical dialogue. He spoke through characters, one of whom, Critias, claimed the story was true, a historical account handed down carefully across generations. And so, from the moment it was written, Atlantis stirred questions. Was it real? Was Plato warning us? Or teaching a lesson? Because Atlantis, you see, was more than just a city. It was an idea. Plato used it to compare two civilizations. Atlantis, vast and powerful, but morally corrupt. And ancient Athens, small, just and noble. He wanted his readers to reflect on hubris, on what happens when a society forgets its virtue. But still, the details were so vivid. He described the concentric rings of the city, circles of land and water, carefully engineered canals and docks, guarded by towers of shining stone. He wrote of elephants and meadows, of hot and cold springs, and a palace glittering with orichalcum, a mysterious metal that shone like fire. He even gave the names of kings, traced their bloodline to Poseidon, and laid out a legal code said to be inscribed on a pillar of divine alloy. And so, the seed was planted. In Plato's time, it was read as an allegory. But as the centuries passed, the line between lesson and history began to blur. Roman thinkers dismissed the tale. Medieval scholars puzzled over it. But by the Renaissance, when explorers were sailing to the edges of the known world, the idea of Atlantis began to flicker again. What if it was real? What if it lay hidden beneath the waves? And as maps grew, so did the mystery. Some pointed west, to the Americas. Others looked to Santorini, shattered by ancient volcanic fire. And still others believed the story was memory, distorted but true, of a forgotten civilization swallowed by disaster. But whether real or symbolic, Atlantis has endured, because it speaks to something deep within us. The fear that all great things might be lost, the hope that they still lie waiting, the haunting beauty of a world that once was and might yet be again. And now, as you close your eyes, imagine Plato writing by lamplight, his words drifting out into history like ripples on a dark sea. He could not have known that his tale would live for 2,000 years, that people would chase it, search for it, dream of it, that even now, across oceans and centuries, we still wonder, what if Atlantis was real? And even more than that, what if we could find it? But to understand the legend fully, we must travel further. In the next chapter, we will step into the imagined streets of Atlantis itself, its rise, its wealth, its sacred geometry, the kingdom that, whether myth or memory, still calls to us from beneath the waves. The ocean stretched endlessly, But in the middle of the great Atlantic, there was a jewel, a kingdom rising from the sea, a land ringed with hills, valleys, and glowing plains, its harbors deep and calm, its soil fertile, and its rivers warm and alive. This was Atlantis, in a vision passed down by Plato. The land had been a gift, bestowed by Poseidon, god of the seas. He had fallen in love with a mortal woman named Cleito, and to protect her, he carved a hill into the center of the island and surrounded it with rings of water and land, 3 of each, alternating like ripples held in perfect symmetry. Here, on that sacred hill, Poseidon built a palace, and from Cleito's womb came 5 sets of twin sons, each destined to rule 1/10 of the empire. But it was the firstborn, Atlas, who inherited the central island. From his name came the island's name, Atlantis, and so the dynasty began. The Atlanteans built with purpose, with grace, with wonder. Their engineers sculpted the island into rings and canals, each perfectly spaced and connected by bridges, tunnels, and harbors. Ships passed from ocean to inner sanctum with ease, sailing through polished stone gates watched by lions of bronze. The central city, said to be 5 stades in diameter, nearly a kilometer across, was a marvel. In the very center stood Poseidon's temple, a massive structure of silver, gold, and glowing orichalcum. Inside, a statue of the god rode a chariot drawn by winged horses, his sons surrounding him in a circle of reverence and rule. Around the temple were palaces and baths, training fields and courts, lush gardens filled with birds, fountains, and strange fruit. The scent of myrrh hung in the air, and the people thrived. They mined the island's riches, gold, copper, and the famed orichalcum. They harnessed natural hot springs for healing and comfort. They built a navy of 1,000 ships, each crafted for speed and power. And they traded far and wide, their vessels seen from Egypt to Iberia. But it was not only their wealth that impressed. It was their order. The Atlanteans lived under the laws passed down by Poseidon himself, inscribed on a pillar in the heart of the temple. Each of the 10 kings ruled a district, but they came together every 5th year at the sacred council to feast, offer sacrifices, and discuss affairs of state. Their unity was their strength. There were no tyrants, only rulers bound by sacred duty and familial bond. Judgments were made calmly. Disputes were rare. Their civilization, for a time, mirrored divine perfection. Beyond the capital, Atlantis spread across the island. There were fields and orchards, temples and theaters, horse-breeding plains, and towering aqueducts. The population was vast, and from every corner, the people came to the capital, to trade, to worship, to witness the glories of their kings. And from the island, they extended outward, to the islands beyond, to distant shores, planting colonies, forging alliances, and, sometimes, taking by force. Their reach became an empire, a sea empire, not defined by land borders, but by currents and coastlines, by harbors held and islands governed. To neighboring peoples, Atlantis was both awe and fear. They brought knowledge, but also dominance. They taught architecture, but also claimed tribute. And yet, at this stage, there was still harmony. The kings were just, the people content, the temples gleamed with light, and the waters whispered of peace. This was the Golden Rise, the chapter in which Atlantis proved what a civilization could become, when blessed with natural riches, divine favor, and unity of purpose. And as the sun set behind their marble cliffs, casting reflections into the deep blue ringed harbors, Atlantis seemed immortal. But as with all things human, perfection could not last. In the next chapter, we will walk into the heart of their golden age, where art, astronomy, and philosophy flourished, and yet, where pride began to stir beneath the gold. In the soft light of imagined memory, Atlantis shimmered. The morning sun glinted off marble towers, and golden reflections danced in the mirror-still waters of the inner rings. It was an age of peace, of splendor, of a people in perfect balance with the world around them. This was the golden age of Atlantis. Here, art was not just decoration. It was devotion. The walls of temples were carved with sacred animals, their shapes fluid like waves, etched with dyes that glowed under torchlight. Scenes of harvests, sea voyages, and rituals of the gods wove the story of a people who did not fear nature, but honored it. Their musicians plucked strings made from woven silver thread, their voices echoing in circular theaters that opened to the sky. At night, the melodies drifted over the canals, blending with the scent of lemon blossoms and the distant hush of tides. Atlantean science was just as refined. They observed the stars not for navigation alone, but for deeper patterns, seeking order in the heavens. Their astronomers charted eclipses, lunar cycles, and planetary alignments. They believed that the heavens above mirrored the waters below, and that understanding one revealed truths about the other. And so, they built observatories atop tall towers, crafted from crystalline stone, transparent to the stars, yet shaded from the burning sun. They designed aqueducts that curved with the land's natural shape, and fountains that seemed to flow endlessly, powered by an understanding of hydraulics that even modern minds might envy. The very layout of the capital mirrored cosmic geometry, circles within circles, rings of earth and sea echoing the orbit of moons. The pulse of time, the breath of Poseidon himself. Justice, too, flowed like water. Disputes were rare, for laws were clear, and the spirit of fairness ran deep. The kings, still descendants of Poseidon, gathered at their council every 5th year, a sacred rhythm passed down for generations. They bathed before the ceremony in the steaming mineral springs, then dressed in woven gold and sat upon carved stone thrones, offering sacrifices before speaking a word. In these halls, diplomacy was sacred. Kings were not above the law, but its guardians. Religion, too, wove through every part of Atlantean life. But unlike the empires of the future, Atlantis was not bound by temples alone. Their faith lived in the land, in the sea foam that kissed the steps of their shrines, in the trembling earth beneath volcanic peaks, in the cry of gulls and the sweep of constellations. Poseidon remained their patron, but their pantheon expanded. Gods of wind, of healing, of memory, and each household paid reverence in their own quiet way. Education was valued. Children learned not only to read and write, but to listen to the world, to one another, to silence. And then there was the craftsmanship. Atlantean builders created columns that twisted like vines, bridges that curved like branches, and homes that seemed to grow from the land instead of being imposed upon it. Their ships were swift and elegant, carved with sea creatures, driven by sail and oar, each one carrying goods and stories to distant coasts. And at the heart of it all was harmony between kings and people, between city and sea, between progress and tradition. Atlantis, in this golden moment, stood not just as a power, but as a promise that a civilization could be both mighty and wise. But golden ages, like golden sunsets, must fade. Even now, as you imagine the glowing streets and tranquil canals, a shadow stirs in the distance. Not a monster, but a mirror, a reflection of the very things that made Atlantis great, becoming distorted. In the next chapter, we drift into the first cracks in perfection. We follow the rise of pride, of ambition stretched too far, of kings who forgot their vows, of warships no longer sailing in peace, and of a moment when Atlantis turned from guardian to conqueror. The seas around Atlantis still glittered, the palaces still shimmered, and the songs still floated softly through the air. But something had changed, not all at once, not like a thunderclap, but like the slow tilt of a star, barely noticed, yet certain. In their golden age, the Atlanteans had mastered nature, but in time, they began to believe they had mastered themselves. Prosperity had grown, and with it, the appetite for more. The 10 kings, once bound by sacred law and humility, began to see their power as their own, not as a gift from Poseidon, but as a right to wield without restraint. The annual gatherings at the temple became grander, but less sacred. The old rites faded. The oracles were consulted less. In their place came new voices, advisors who whispered of expansion, of tribute, of glory that should not be shared, but taken. Atlantis, once the heart of a peaceful sea empire, became a force of conquest. Their ships, once bearing olive oil and ivory, now carried bronze-tipped spears and armored warriors. They crossed into the Mediterranean with new intentions, claiming islands, pressing inland, and demanding allegiance from once equal cities. Many yielded, some resisted, but all came to fear the growing shadow of Atlantis. Even distant Egypt began to stir in alarm, and to the east, the young city-states of ancient Greece took notice. It was said that Athens, still in its mythic infancy, rose in opposition, not out of ambition, but out of memory. They remembered what Atlantis had been, and what it was becoming. Legends say that Athens gathered its allies and stood against the vast navy of Atlantis, that a great battle unfolded, one not recorded in scrolls, but etched in the echo of myths passed down through generations. And though the Atlanteans outnumbered and outmatched their foes, they met resistance unlike any they had ever seen. The gods, too, had watched, and what they saw disturbed them. For the Atlanteans had turned their backs on the old ways. They no longer honored the harmony of land and sea, nor respected the balance between might and mercy. They had forgotten their origin, their oath, their place. Pride had grown like vines across their monuments. Power had taken root in the hearts of their kings. And now, the cost was coming. According to Plato, the gods met in council, and Poseidon, their father and protector, said nothing, because even he, it seemed, had been silenced by sorrow. Then came the signs. The earth beneath the island began to hum. The tide shifted. Fires broke out beneath the mountains, and the sky darkened, not in storm, but in silence. It is said that in a single day and night of misfortune, Atlantis was consumed. The earth opened, the sea roared, the temples cracked, the rings collapsed, and then only foam. No survivors, no trace, just water where wonder once stood. But before that final moment, before the collapse, there was this part of the tale. A once noble civilization losing its way. A people who had been in balance with the world, now tipping the scales too far. And as you lie still, letting your breath rise and fall like gentle waves, you might feel the weight of this quiet truth. Even the greatest of empires can't forget who they were. And when they do, the sea remembers. In our next chapter, we descend into the collapse, not in panic, but in slow motion. A vision of temples sinking, of harbors vanishing, of a world unraveling beneath the waves. At first, it felt like a dream, a low trembling beneath the earth, a wind that did not blow, but pressed. The birds fell quiet. The waves seemed to pause mid-breath. The people of Atlantis, still wrapped in the glitter of their golden empire, looked up from their temples and gardens, their feasts and courtyards, and saw the sky change. A strange stillness rolled across the land, as though the world were holding its breath. Then the earth cracked, not in one place, but in many, long jagged tears stretching across fields and markets, opening beneath fountains and shrines. The water, once guided in elegant rings, rose with terrible speed. The canals overflowed. The harbor surged. Walls meant to protect now trapped the flood within. From the high tower of the central temple, the priests saw the sea lift, not in waves, but in a slow, rising wall. A great roar followed, not thunder, not wind, but something deeper, the sound of the ocean reclaiming. Fires burst from the hills, red rivers flowing from the mouths of mountains. Smoke coiled upward as ash began to fall like snow, clinging to the golden roofs and silver streets. People ran, but there was nowhere to go. The bridges were broken, the tunnels flooded. The outer rings had vanished beneath the water. What had taken centuries to build was being undone in moments. Some cried out to Poseidon, hoping the god who had once gifted the land would return. But no answer came, only the steady climb of water and the deep groaning of stone collapsing into sea. The royal palace fell last. Its columns, once proud and carved with sacred myths, tilted like reeds in a storm. Before slipping beneath the foam, statues sank, flames hissed, the city disappeared. And then, silence. Just the sea, rippling where marble once gleamed. Just the wind, sighing where voices once sang. No survivors, no sails, no songs. The island of Atlantis was gone. In Plato's tale, it happened in a single day and night of misfortune, a swift punishment for pride, a lesson written not in ink, but in water and absence. The world beyond watched, and for a time they mourned. But Atlantis, so vast and glorious in life, vanished from maps, from memory, from truth, and yet it never truly left. Stories echoed from shore to shore. Sailors spoke of a place beneath the sea, where shadows of towers could still be seen on clear days. Waves seemed different near certain islands, warmer, sadder. Divers claimed to hear music beneath the currents. Atlantis became not just a lost city, but a symbol of beauty, of ambition, of what happens when balance is broken. And as centuries passed, the name Atlantis floated through minds and mouths. From Greek philosophers to Renaissance poets, from explorers to dreamers. It became a canvas, a warning, a wonder, a whispered memory from a world that might have been. And as you lie in stillness now, drifting with the current of thought, you may feel a trace of it too. Not fear, not grief, but reverence. For the mystery, for the silence, for the city beneath the waves. In our final chapter, we rise from the depths to explore the legacy of Atlantis, how a vanished world became eternal, etched not in stone, but in the imagination of humankind. Long after the last stone vanished beneath the waves, Atlantis rose again, not from the ocean floor, but from the minds of poets, philosophers, and dreamers. The sea had swallowed its palaces, its gardens, its gold, but something deeper remained, a memory, a whisper, a mystery that refused to fade. It began, as far as history records, with Plato. In the 4th century BCE, the great philosopher described Atlantis in vivid detail, its rings of land and water, its mighty kings, its fall from grace. He claimed the tale came from ancient Egypt, passed through Solon, and entrusted to his dialogues as both allegory and warning. But even Plato left questions. Did he mean it as literal history, a moral fable, a parable of hubris and divine justice? No one knew for certain, and that uncertainty was the seed. Atlantis became a canvas. Medieval monks copied the tale with reverence. Renaissance scholars debated its meaning, and by the time of the Age of Exploration, Atlantis had become a map of hope, a promised land hidden just beyond the horizon. Some said it was in the Atlantic Ocean, its ruins buried beneath the Bermuda Triangle. Others pointed to Spain, to the Caribbean, to Antarctica, or even the lost lands of the Azores. With every discovery, sunken cities, ancient artifacts, unknown languages, Atlantis was invoked. It was a mirror, reflecting not what had been, but what people longed to find. A perfect civilization, wise, beautiful, balanced. Atlantis became more than a myth. It became a symbol of lost wisdom, of golden ages, of human potential left behind. Writers reimagined it. Francis Bacon wrote of New Atlantis, a utopia guided by reason and science. Jules Verne hinted at Atlantean secrets beneath the sea. And in modern times, Atlantis found its way into films, games, and dreams, remade in every new generation's image. Even scientists joined the search. Geologists studied seismic maps of the seafloor. Historians combed through flood myths across cultures. Could Atlantis have been Santorini, destroyed by volcanic eruption, or a memory of real Bronze Age kingdoms lost to time? Still, the mystery remained unsolved. And perhaps that is the point. Atlantis lives not because it is proven, but because it inspires. It reminds us of balance, how a people so advanced could fall so quickly. It teaches humility, that even golden cities cannot escape nature. And it invites wonder, that there may still be things beneath the waves we have yet to understand. As you rest now, eyes heavy, imagine the city as it once was. Circles of light, temples glowing, water gently lapping at marble stairs. Not gone, not forgotten, just waiting, beneath the sea, beneath the mind, beneath the surface of sleep. And as you drift further, remember this. Atlantis was never just a place. It was a dream, and dreams never truly sink.